Braco for 6 years, so he's clearly got a problem. And he's been on for a good. Okay, I'll let him do it.
That's just lovely. I've never had that greeting before. Thank you.
I didn't know.
I don't want to F-bomb before I've even officially started. That would be bad.
17 miles.
There you go. 17. That's pretty good. Okay, we're a little bit stretched for square, but it'll do. Hello, I'm Pete. I'm from England, hence the crazy accent. And so crazy. And I'm from Offer Code. I started Offer Code about 10 years ago, something like that. And we've grown, and we're actually growing. We're tiny. There's about 4 or 5. And we're from the UK. We are an official gold partner. I'm very proud to be so. And I personally am an official Umbraco fanboy, I think it's fair to say. So today I'm going to talk to you about heresy, React.js with Umbraco. It's a bit of a lie, actually. It's mostly React.js. The Umbraco bit's really easy. So it's just a tiny little bit. And if you saw the Angular talk from Kyle, which Rob, if you didn't see it, it's pretty much all the same stuff he said about that. Just swap out React.js for Angular and it still kind of makes sense. So I'm going to get 2 talks for 1, double whammy on. So, heretic's an interesting word. Someone stopped me outside and said, heresy? What is that? I've never even known what that is. Is that a typo or something? So I thought I'd best explain that it's not a typo. It's from the Middle Ages when we used to burn people if they didn't believe what we all thought they should do. So the person holding an opinion at odds with what is generally accepted, and I'm a heretic because I'm going to suggest React.js is pretty cool to play with. It's a JavaScript templating language similar to AngularJS, but not. AngularJS, but not. I'm saying don't use AngularJS, which for the last couple of years has been use AngularJS. But what this talk isn't about is stripping out the whole back end of Umbraco and replacing it all with React.js without being said. And you won't get any gain, and it's just a complete waste of time. So don't do that. Instead, it's just about using it at the front end. If you know Angular really, really well, keep using it, that's fine. It's a nice short bit of talk for you there. You can leave if you want to. React.js is just another flavor. It's one that I particularly really, really enjoy. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So, this is what used to happen to heretics. And again, I don't use thinking it's just want to burn me. It's quite horrible. What I do like is they've actually chopped his hand off the bow. Just to make it a little bit worse. He does look like Lawrence. We do that to Lawrence. So, no AngularJS, burn him! So, why are you not using AngularJS even? Found it a bit complicated, if I'm honest. I think it's wonderful, it's incredibly powerful, but wow, you really need to know quite a bit of it to get anything out of it. To a point. Incidentally, the back end of Umbraco, we make prop edits and everything fantastic. Perfect, continue doing that. They've done a really good job. You just have to know enough to get those working, that's great. But if you want to use it on the front end, I found you have to do quite a lot of it with it to get it to do what it's doing, kind of. Burn. It's got an uncertain future, which is not a popular thing to say, but for those who don't know, don't keep the finger on the pulse of Angular. A couple of months ago, maybe about 5 months ago, they had a big conference and they stood up and they announced that we're going to throw everything away with it we've done with Angular and do Angular 2, which will be nothing like what Angular 1 is currently, and be completely different. And all your code that you've written in Angular 1 and spent a lot of time learning will not be compatible with anything we're about to produce in Angular 2. And that didn't go down awfully well. What do you mean? I spent 2 years learning how to do this damn stuff, and now you're just telling me, start over, sorry. So everyone who sold it to their boss or who's done all the training courses suddenly just going to have to learn it again. It also didn't help that when they said, well, we're going to do it this new funky way, and they put a screenshot up of the new language that they want to go do to do it, and you just really go, that's insane, it's garbage, horrible, and they said this is better, and I couldn't get it myself. Did you think that too?
Yeah, they just changed it again.
They changed it again? And they've now massively backpedaled now and said, well, we didn't mean any of that. No, we can still be just like one. Like, I'm sorry, it's me, it's not you, and we talked about it. We were just asking the community for ideas, that's all it was, which is why we stood up in the keynote and said, this is definitely happening, we're going to do this. Total radical change. So they've backpedaled quite a lot. So it's got an uncertain future. There's been an awful bit now where because they've done that, no one's really actively developing Angular version 1 anymore because, well, it's all going to get thrown away in a year, so why bother? So there's kind of like a little bit of stalemate occurred. So at that time, React had come out a couple of months beforehand, and everyone started saying, you should try React, it's fantastic. Try that instead. So I did. I really quite liked it. Is it just the day of things to pop up during presentations today? Okay. Good or bad timing kind of relates to that thing. We had a project starting, and the project was perfect for needing an Angular front end on it. I thought, this is great, it's more appy. It's a booking engine for a holiday company. So I thought, well, there's lots of drop downs, changing this, that, and the other. I want 4 passengers, and 2 of them are children, and we want to go half board or all inclusive, whatever else. So lots of interaction stuff going on, and we needed to get the search results to update fast, and it just screamed to me, yes, a really good excuse to use Angular as opposed to lobbing 150K's worth of JavaScript for a very tricky form somewhere. I thought this one actually might be justified. So it was a no-brainer. We're going to go Angular with it. We were really looking forward to it because we could learn Angular much better, and then that would pay back into the back end of Umbraco, so we were all quite excited about all that sort of stuff. And then they did the announcement, and then I had to go looking around, and then I found about React.js. So is it a good thing or bad timing? I don't know, but I'm quite happy with the decision we made going for React. I really like learning new stuff, and I really liked what I saw, which is why I didn't go with Angular. We're all right. You're still going to burn me.
Not during your talk.
Not during my talk. Well, that's courteous. There's a bit of English in here. So some of the pros of React.js. It's really, really easy to learn, as long as you know some JavaScript. It's not, you don't need to be a whiz kid, you don't need to know about dependency injection or anything else that sounds really complicated that scared me, factories and all that stuff. You don't have to worry about that sort of stuff. If you know some very basic JavaScript, not so basic, but you need to know JavaScript, you don't be scared by curly brackets and be happy to make objects on the fly. And if you're all right with that, then you can crack on. It's very powerful, despite its simplicity. It's really, 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 you do a lot of really cool stuff with it. And it handles a lot of the nasty stuff for you. It doesn't get in any way, unless you do some, you can hold your hand, which I really quite like. It's very fast. Always fast. I thought I knew how fast JavaScript was. But then I started doing this and going, that's insane. There's no way to be able to do what it does. It's just bonkers fast. It's a good phrase. Did you get bonkers in the States, by the way?
Oh, yeah.
Did bonkers? Yeah, that's good. Server-side rendering. Woo! I believe this is possible in AngularJS. There is some magic plugin or something that may or may not allow this to happen. But you definitely can do it in React.js. So it's built for it, it's fantastic. Word of the day is called isomorphic templating. Okay, that's not bad, is it? Write one template once, it will render on the client, it'll also render on the server. You're giving me a funny look like, is it really pronounced that way? Is that right?
No, I just did that. I'm really amazing.
Yeah. You are not convinced that for the rest of the talk, so you are my main target. I must convert you. Easy to heretic, burning. So, easy to maintain. React forces you to build everything in a very modular style. It doesn't force you at all, but encourages you to build things in a nice modular style. And as a result, it's relatively easy to maintain. And when you look at the code, you kind of can get what it's doing very quickly without necessarily having to start digging through loads of stuff. So it's easy to fill up get the mind space of what it is that you're building, what it's actually doing. Which is great for when you come back in 6 months and they want to change to it. You haven't got to spend 3 days trying to remember how the heck this thing works. Instead, you can just have a click through and you go, okay, I kind of get it. And it's nice to hold your hand and you're in through that sort of stuff. It's also got a massive big background in the name of Facebook. They wrote it, they released it, which is quite like them. They're trying to get all open sourcey, which is great. It's currently running the chat system on Facebook, so if you've ever messaged anyone on Facebook, you've used React without knowing it. The whole of Instagram's written on with React, and I think Yahoo Mail has now just launched using React all the way through. So some big names using it, and a big name developing it. Facebook have about 20 developers all working on it. Pretty much flat out, that's their job, which is great. Some drawbacks. Yet another framework to learn, right? Is anyone else just bored? Oh, how many? How many been released during this talk, I wonder? It's just... And they're all the latest and greatest one. I talked about build tools a bit further on, so we've completely ruined that slide, just by talking a bit about now. Is anyone using any build tools like Grunt, and you say, oh, I need to use these things. You need to use grunt, fantastic. Within 30 minutes of you tweeting, hey, I got grunt working, someone will go, should be using gold. What's gold? I don't want that on webpack. Oh, right, okay. I can't keep up. And then there's another one, or like Flubber, you're just making names. That can't be true, right? You Google it, it's not popped up because it's so new, it's only just come out an hour ago. And it's so much better than the last one, which was better than the last one, which was better than the last one. It just gets tiresome. So, this is a con. Yes, you're going to have to learn some more stuff. Sorry about that. It's not as powerful as Angular because it's just a templating language. It's not the all singing, all dancing, does everything language. So as a result, that's great because it's just focused on one thing. I make templating really, really easy and fast. That's all it does. So it's not deemed as powerful as Angular. You need other code to make useful as a result because it's just templating. If you want to do any AJAX calls or any other craziness that you might want to do, you have to plug in some other code. That can be your own code or it can be a framework of your choice. It plays very well with jQuery, etc. if you really want to. It's all very cool. Happy to play along with that sort of stuff. Because it's React.js, you can't use any of the knowledge that you're hopefully going to learn by doing Angular in the back end, which is a bit of a pain in the arse. That was one of the things we were really hoping we'd get out of it if we did. It's very, very new, as discussed. I think it's been around, I think Facebook has been developing for over a year, but it's been out in the wild for about 6 odd months, I think. Don't quote me on that, that's the other thing, kind of roughly, finger in the air kind of quote. Another comment, there's no massive backer called Facebook, which can be a good thing or a bad thing. Angular's got a massive backer called Google, and as also previously discussed, they then said, we're changing everything and throwing it away, just when you thought it was all standardized and really good. So Facebook could do something crazy with it as well. But I think that's counted quite nicely because it's not very big, and so it's not an epic, massive framework that's constantly going to be updated and stop breaking whenever I release another version or anything like that. It's nice and simple, it just does what it does. So it's out there in the wild now, so in theory, the mythical someone could fork it and continue the project if they really wanted to. But, so let's have a quick look at React. What is it all about? So the general gist is whenever you're building anything in React, you're building a component. It's base element you will make. A component can be a title, it can be a picture on a page. It's a block of something, some content basically. You can put properties into that component and it will then do something with them. Properties is just a JavaScript object that you throw it in and say, there you go, render that big boy. They render HTML using those properties. Nice and easy. You can nest them, which is where the power starts kicking in. Simple component may sound pretty dull, but if you then have a component within a component which loops over many other things and renders out components for each of those dot loops, then you can start building up a real nice list of stuff that is all small enough so it's really easy to test, but you can start adding up and it all becomes greater than the sum of its parts. Components can store state, and don't talk about state very much, I can't fit everything in, but if you've got a checkbox as part of your component, that's got some state, whether it's checked or not. You just think of state as being the client-side version of what that component should be doing. So a checkbox is a great example, just a text box, then you have the text that's in the text box will also be part of the state. The value is checked, or whatever you want to do. And all this is done with plain old JavaScript, so there's no crazy dollar signs, there's no magic incantations or anything that's got to be done there. Actually not 100% true, there's a thing called JSX which I'm going to come up to, and when you first see it you'll go, what? But just roll with it. So what on earth is a component? When do you make one? Nice 2 rules, really easy. You've got a bit of a page that's got any data at all that needs to be rendered out, you'll make a component, and if you wrap it around it or span, it's probably a component. It's nice and easy, isn't it? So here is a sample of a page that we've got. We've got lots of bits on it. Anything that could be a div. Hey, look, that works. So we've got a big chunk of text. We've got this thing down the bottom, the big image. They're all components. Every one of them is done. And I took the liberty of putting green dolly boxes on it. They give you an idea. What is nice though here, I've got 2 components, kind of the same thing, so I'm reusing those, and they're nested within another component to kind of show you how you can do kind of nesting stuff. Now they're just green boxes, I've not even CSS. Call myself a web designer. Ah, didn't even paint. So, and code-wise, this is what these things sort of look like. So we're doing the star rating, if you don't know, which is that one at the top, or in this particular case, flame rating, which kind of scares me because I don't want to go to a hotel. This will burn 4 flames. Whoa! capital if you're doing a component, just to separate them out from standard variables, which, again, if you watch Carl's talk, that's what JavaScript is lowercase for the variable. You call React, which we assume is global. It's out there somewhere in the global namespace, and I can always get to it. You call create class, you pass in your nice little angle curly bracket thing. It has one thing and one thing only, or the bare minimum that it needs, and that's a render function. And that'll get called by React when it wants to actually render it. And all the render function does, wow, is return HTML rendered inside JavaScript. And that looks totally broken and wrong, doesn't it? And do you remember earlier on when I said, yeah, Angular released this crazy format that just looked totally weird and crap. Sorry. Don't worry about it. About 3 slides time, this will all make perfect sense. But basically, we put HTML in there, we render out properties, stars, which is lovely, and we're doing it for the title, so accessibility, and then we render it out here as well. In order to get that thing to actually render on the page, wherever I want to render it on, well, not even wherever I want it, I call this thing here and say, hey, React, can you render star ratings with this value, and can you stick it in the body, please? And that's what that will do. And so you have the most boring web page ever, which will be white blank with 4 flaming stars. That's what that will do. Which looks really dull. But the clever bit about this is this could be my nega app, and you call that once. If everything is nested, it will just go component galore. It will render itself out beautifully. And all we have to do at the top here is you just go initial data. Call it what you like, that's not a special variable, that's just a variable. Call it Pete's amazing demo data, whatever it is, equals, and then throw in a great big object. And the rest of it will just go, I know what to do with this object. I'm going to render it all out. We don't have any models. Quite liberating. It's just a big chunk of JSX. Just like that. So JSX, that's a crazy wireless HTML in my JavaScript. That really shouldn't be there moment. It's not as nasty as you think. It really isn't. I know the initial gut reaction is piss off. That's horrible. Never. Burn it in fire. But we cheat, you see. We write it like that, and then we run it through something called a precompiler, which will automatically swap out all those HTML tags into just plain old JavaScript. And it actually renders out, it says, pretty much renders out shitloads of these. So wherever it says that, it just goes, hey, React, can you render this thing here doing that? And if you look at it, it's really ugly. Well, it's just repetitive. So this angle bracket notation takes away all that repetitiveness. There are a ton of JavaScript nutters who insist on not using JSX. I do not know why. It's like, I need to be close to the code. Give me the raw code, I must write it to it. And I don't understand, because you're not saving anything, you're just wasting time. So, use it. It's fantastic. The reason it's so awesome is we know HTML really, really well. We know JavaScript really, really well. It just sounds a bit funny mixing the two. I drink a lot of tea, for instance. And if the person making the round of tea in the office makes a coffee first, then lifts the spoon up and puts it in my tea, what they then need is coffee. Or toffee. Because you can't put a bit of coffee in tea. You ruin the tea. If you make the tea first, but the person making coffee doesn't know. You can put half a cup of tea in coffee and it still tastes like coffee. So you kind of think these things shouldn't mix, but it just sort of works. We both know both languages. Very comfortable with HTML. It's decorative. When you look at it and you go, hey, I want a star rating, I want it with a value of 4, and you know in an instant what that's doing. You haven't got to think about it. So it kind of reads pretty well. It's not a requirement. You don't have to use it if you don't want to. I just think you're insane if you don't. It's not XAML before anyone says anything either. I know we're all Microsoft heads in here, and I had a few people go, hey, looks a bit like XAML, and wasn't that a disaster? And I go, no, it's not XAML. No, it's not. It's HTML, JavaScript, and we're web devs, and that's perfectly okay. Here's a big one. Now we're nesting. Oh, exciting. Top one we see, you can scan that and go, yep, that's not changed at all, unless I've done a typo, that should be fine. Bottom one, oh, here's the clever bit. Uses the other one. Look at that. I can refer to my own components in the same JSX, HTML crazy ass style within other components. This stuff's getting really exciting. You can very quickly write stuff that looks just like normal HTML. And you say, render me the header. Well, yeah, you can do headers, you can do the title tags and all sorts, even the script tags that include stuff. Pretty nasty, bonkers crap, I like it. I haven't done that, but I have seen it done. So you can do all sorts of crazy stuff. So dare I go back 27 clicks to show you that hotel picture, or can you imagine? You can imagine, right? So you've got the hotel, and you've got the image, you've got the title, you've got the star rating, you've got the bit of blurb at the bottom. What we mentioned there, 5 components, it'll be about 6 lines of HTML, and you'll know exactly what each of those does. That's the iterative bit. We'll have one called star rating, we'll have one called RP, which is the text down the bottom. We have one called hotel image. Guess what that is? You can just scan it and you go, I know this, I read this is great. That comes back and influences that easy to maintain stuff. To fill up your headspace with what the thing is that your building's doing, you just glance at it and go, oh, I know exactly what that's doing. Because all the tags tell me exactly what that's doing. They're so self-describing that I ain't having to worry about it. And again, down the bottom, I am now rendering my title instead of star rating. I'm poking in a name, and I'm also passing in stars. So go back up here. This thing doesn't receive anything, notice I haven't had to declare any of these things. I get a magic thing here called props, which you can always access. So I go this.props equals name, that's where that bit's coming from. But look, I pass through, I chain in the stars, get chained in here. I still have this.props.stars. That thing there is only remembering that it wants a star rating, or sorry, flame rating. And that's all it's after. It doesn't care where necessarily where it comes from. And we can poke it in from anywhere, and I'm just chaining these things down between the two components. So components are predictable, and this is why another reason this stuff's really easy to do. A component will only do exactly what you poke into it. It will only render what you've told it to. And that sounds like a really simple, obvious thing to do. Because we write code, right? Our code only ever does what we tell it to, which is why we spend so much time debugging it. So, did anyone get that one? Thank you. One of the reasons it's predictable is all the state for that particular component that we're rendering is contained within that component. We're kind of it kind of goes against the grain because we're used to separating out presentation logic from business logic, and suddenly we're going back in time and saying, just wrap all that up into one file and it'll all be good. And it doesn't feel right. It's a very awkward thing to understand because your whole developer brain for the last 10, 15 years is screaming, no, it's insanity, never mix the two, you'll make coffee. And you've just got to avoid doing that. In fact, by encapsulating, you haven't got to worry about it. Because you know, when I say star rating, where's the bit of code that renders star rating? It's the star rating component. Everything's there. It's all the business logic for what happens if you pass in a string instead of a number and all that crap. It's all in there. It can handle itself. It knows what it's doing. It's a one component little box and it just does what it does. They're really predictable as well because if you change the data that you poke in, it'll redraw itself. The whole thing just it'll throw away what it had and redraw itself. And that also is really predictable because whatever I poke in, I know it's going to poke out the stuff I'm expecting it to. Nothing else is interacting with it. Nothing else is changing its state. The only thing that changes its state is what I poke into it through the front door. And it will always render the same thing. Again, that sounds like a really stupid thing to say, but that's where its power is. I give it this JavaScript object, or I pass in this name, or I pass in this star rating. It will always render exactly the same thing, because it's stupid and it doesn't know how to do anything else. But from that stupidity comes great power and ease of use. So here is my shitty analogy number 1. Trying to explain how this easy thing is really easy, when actually, anyway, it's difficult. So I came up with this great, wonderful analogy of a cannon. If I put a pound of gunpowder in this cannon, and I exclude all the external things that you're already thinking about recoil, what about wind direction, and what about the gravity, which changes depending on shut up, right? Just ignore all that. It's a very crap analogy, but roll with it. So I put a pound of gunpowder in there, ram it down and fire it. It will always go roughly the same amount of distance. Because it's always going to do the same thing. Whatever the input is that I put in it, it's always going to do the same amount of distance every time. Put a pound in, reload, fire, bang! Pound in, reload, fire. These cannonballs are going to be landing in exactly the same spot. Put 2 pounds in, it's going to go so much further. But I know how far because I've got some sort of artillery chart. That's how we're really good at killing people on battlefields, for this very reason. Simple logics. Now, that's talking about a cannon. You think, well, okay, that's very, very well, but what if we do add wind and everything? Well, if we extrapolate this sort of thing, we build upon this very simple process of pound of gunpowder, fire, bang, always goes over there. You can do some really wonderful things, as long as you scale it up a little bit. You can go to the moon. Basically, this is a cannon with a lot of moving parts. But all those parts have been tested, they all do exactly the same thing. They know that when they poke in this particular amount of rocket fuel, it will go in this particular direction, and it will do its thing. And that's quite exciting. And I'm an American, I get to show you this, and you're all getting with pride, and I love the fact that I've done that for you today. Right, this is the great thing. So we're talking about gunpowder and firing things out. React handles the redraw of that, which is one of the other things you need to give up when you're trying to do React development.
Second cup of tea is lovely.
Thank you, because that's stone cold. So if we change the data, I said it redraws. So if we poke in different properties, it will redraw. If we change the state, which I mentioned about a checkbox, it will redraw, which sounds really, really crazy. But normally when we're developing web stuff, we're using jQuery, and if we need to update something, we go get a particular DOM element. We say, right, I need to change the star rating, so I don't know why, but you will go, find the star rating, and then change the HTML to be blah, and you do that. You manipulate it yourself directly. And that works really, really well when you're updating one thing. When you've got 6 or 7 things that might all be related or all looking at different things, you can very quickly get in a real mess. And the way we get around that is we don't do it anymore. And it's really, really, really tempting to want to meddle with all these DOM elements as much as we can. But you back off. React handles doing the drawing. You do not draw. You just push in different properties. That's all you do. Or you change the state. That's all you do. And change the state sounds like funny. Well, which bits can change the state? It doesn't matter. If you change the state, the thing will just redraw instantly. And it's done. And by letting React handle that, it really frees up your mind. Because you're not having to worry about, if I do that, I'm going to have to take off the event handlers, then I'm going to have to update it, and I have to delete it out first, actually copy it from a template that I've got somewhere, then inject it in, and then reapply this to the event handler. You're bored already, but I'm bored telling you about it. You've done it enough times, so let's just skip over that bit. So you take all that shit away, instead of saying, hey React, draw that thing again with this data instead. It goes, okay, and does its thing. That sounds really bonkers, though, because that's meant to be massively performant, right? Well, come on, you did the front end thing before me. That's just dirty. That's just going to be so just flicker galore.
I like it.
You like a bit of flicker, doesn't it? You can pass in different properties, it will redraw. If you do get a parent to draw, it will redraw all the children as well, which sounds really massively slow and crap. How is this even possible? What am I saying? I'm a heretic. Burn me! But it's clever. React will only change what needs changing, even though it redraws it all the time. If nothing's really changed in the DOM, let's say the star rating is the only thing that's changed in the DOM, that's the only bit that will update. And the way it updates it, it will create some statements that will manipulate that DOM for you. So the bits that's code you would have written in jQuery by hand, React effectively makes that for you and goes, hey, browser, you need to run this stuff to update this page to get to where the guy just told me he needs to get it to. And he does that with something called a virtual DOM. Bear with me on this bit, feel free to glaze over. No one saw that, okay. So in the browser, you've got a thing called the DOM. It's big, it's massive. Every single element inside that page has loads of properties and data all about where it's going to be, what padding it's got, what size it is, what its z-index is, and a million other things. React keeps what's called a virtual DOM copy of what it ought to be drawing. And when you say, hey, I need you to redraw this star rating, please, it will compare the two, and it actually does a diff. It's bonkers. This is where you go, how fast is JavaScript allowed to do that? That's amazing. So actually go, what have we actually got? What do we think we need? What's different? It rattles through and it goes, right, the only thing that differs is star rating is now 3 instead of 4, therefore core found star rating, and update its value to 4. Run that code. And that's the only bit it does. So in order to get your magic, when you throw your properties at it, you might only run 2 lines of JavaScript to actually update your DOM. That is insanely fast. It'll go, and it's done. You won't even notice it. That's how fast it is. Super fast. But it's really hard to let go. You just go, this is crazy. I still want to manipulate things. So golden rule, do not manipulate things. Just manipulate the data you poke into your props, into components, which you know will always do the same thing. You're changing the amount of gunpowder in the can. You're not moving the can. Is that okay? Hey, and if we do enough of this sort of stuff, stretching the analogy, get you really proud, you can build one of these. Okay? Super complex now. We launched many, many rockets to get this thing up there and doing its thing. Is a nice analogy. We need to change the astronauts that are on the space station. We do not take a whole new space station up. We don't take this one down and rebuild it and take it up again. We just send up 3 more astronauts. If you want to really blow your mind a little bit more, React doesn't even do that. Recently, the astronauts needed a new tool on the space station, and they actually have a 3D printer up there now. And NASA managed to send up the instruction set for the tool that they needed digitally and say, hey, you need to print this out, and they printed it out on the space station. Nothing went up but data, just exactly what was needed. The instruction set needed for them to do the change that was required. So, you like that? I'm really proud of that. I'm touching fault. So that's kind of thing. So the space station stays up there, that's your DOM. We sent up just the bits of information that we needed to change the state to what we wanted, which is we need a new wrench up on the space station. I said wrench. I'm pretty proud of that. I'm becoming American. And they set that up and it was up there and it kind of works the same sort of way. Also, really helps you out. There's another reason why I love it. It doesn't want you to fail, it wants you to do good stuff. And some of the ways it does that, it's got console statements which warn you. They don't just go, error, dickhead, line 100. Instead it goes, hey, while scanning this stuff, I noticed you did this. You probably wanted to do that, so I'm just going to ignore it, but flag it up for you. And you can tell just right line number, it doesn't say, 1,500 levels deep in scope, you're... It goes, I saw what you went to do, I'm not going to render it because of this. Or, even better, it says, I did render it, but I'm not rendering it to perform it as I could. If you just put an ID on that particular element, I'll be able to render so much faster. You go, that's really nice, thank you, that's good information to know. It's telling me how to do my job better. Type checking. Someone said that they really missed type checking when they have to go back to JavaScript. We've been doing a lot of C# stuff. React has a wonderful thing built in called prop types, which basically you can kind of do type checking on the fly. So all that data we're passing through, remember we passed in name and we passed star rating. Star rating has to be a number. If it's not a number, it's going to blow up, let's say that's the case. So you can actually define something in your class called prop types, just like this actually. And this thing will get called every time it tries to render. And all that's going to do is going to validate the bits that we're poking in to make sure that they are of whatever type I've told it to be here. And there's hundreds of these things. You've got object string, Boolean, datetime arrays, you can even do whole shapes, and you can nest all these as well. It's quite strange. And you can also add this little modifier on in that says it's required. And again, if you're in developer mode, live it doesn't do this, it totally ignores it. But on developer mode, it'll send you another console statement and go, oh, shoddy, shoddy, shoddy. What are you doing? You need to fix that, which is great. What we've also started doing is, some people have been avoiding this because they're worried about the bloke sending it down client side, because when it gets minified, it's still got to go down the wire. And we're working on a plugin to remove that bloat, that prototype. It will never run client side, but when production, you'll never see it. So what we're going the other way, which is to use it. We find this massively helpful to put this in your variable posts. It helps document what your component is expecting, what's required. So it's like self-documenting and self-checking. It's really handy to do. But to make it kind of helpful at the front end, we're going to strip it out when we compile it down. It's a very handy way of working. As we work, there's a Chrome extension to show you what your components look like. This is wizardry. I don't know how it does what it does, honestly. So you know you look at the DOM in DevTools, they've got a React tab for that, you can click on that, and instead of showing you div with value of star rating, instead it shows you the JSX star, it says star rating, and that's actually the tag it's got in there. Then you can click on it, you can see what values it got poked in and why it was rendering. So you actually see a DOM that's very similar to what you're actually writing in your React code, which means finding stuff, so knowing what calls what, really, really easy. Great for helping debug stuff. Use testable via Jest, not done it yet, but it is very testable via Jest. Jest is Facebook's own testing framework. It is really easy. I've done a few while playing around at lunchtime. We haven't actually got anything out live production code that renders the cosh bit for the deadline. All it does really, because React can render a string, so instead of rendering a DOM instruction, you say, can I just have the string of HTML that this component would render, please? It will give you that back. And you can very easily say, if you render star rating with a 4, I'm expecting a span back with a 4 stars mentioned in. And you can just do a